Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Marshall Center's ESI Insider Brief. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yevgeniya Gaber. I'm professor at the Marshall Center, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the College Dean, Dr. Tim Dreifke. Thanks, Tim, for being with us, and by course director, Colonel Oskar Baumeister. Thank you, Oskar. And as we quickly approach the application deadline for our upcoming Emerging Security Issues course, which is the 17th of July, we decided to spend the next 30 minutes discussing the highlights of this course, what makes this course different from other resident courses of the Marshall Center, and also answering some of the questions that you may have as hopefully our future participants. But before we dive deep into the course details and I ask some questions to our course director, let me turn to you, Tim, and let's talk a bit about the bigger picture. The European security landscape is evolving at unprecedented pace right now. We see changes on the battlefield in Ukraine. We see really fast developments in the European defense industrial base and the evolving Transatlantic partnership. And as a response to that, the Marshall Center has developed a completely new, brand new program plan to help our participants get a better understanding of all these complex geopolitical changes. So could you walk us through these changes and maybe also talk a bit about the thinking behind these changes, as we're now focusing on advancing the European-led deterrence and defense, and also on skills-based training and enhanced regional expertise. So what should our participants expect from this new program plan of the Marshall Center?
Well, thanks, Yevgenia. You really set that up perfectly. You know, the strategic context of everything that we have been focusing on has changed, not just around the Marshall Center for Europe and the Transatlantic Industrial Base and our relationships. And so the Marshall Center 15, 18 months ago, when we saw from the U.S. the INDSG, the Interim National Strategic Defense Guidance that came out, we immediately started taking action based on that. And we took a look at what our curriculum was at the time. For years, and our alumni will remember this, we had these programs on applied security studies, regional security studies, terrorism, cyber, countering transnational organized crime, and all of those were relevant for the time. In fact, we haven't abandoned those. And I'll get to how we've incorporated so much of that into what is our new and adaptable plan. So then as we continue moving forward, and in January, we had the National Defense Strategy, which really codified what we had already started moving toward, right? And we wanted to lean into what was our US and German binational relationship that we have fostered for decades as the George C. Marshall Center, and even years before that in its previous iterations. And so we've crafted this annual program plan that really helps facilitate, as you mentioned, the European-led defense, getting towards this NATO 3.0 of kind of the restructuring. And none of that's going to be viable unless we have this supercharged transnational, transatlantic defense industrial base. So we've really thread a lot of that throughout what we're doing. So as I mentioned, for the alumni that recall what we've done before, we've taken that curricula, incorporated new lessons learned into what we're doing now, and we've updated it into modules. Because something else that we've realized is that it's hard, even harder now, to dedicate a 4 or 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks to coming to a course. And so we've given the opportunity now for participants, if they want to come for 1 week, and you're going to hear this when Oskar talks about emerging security issues, there's opportunities to come for 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We hope that you can stay the whole time. That's the best experience, but we're really trying to make this as an opportunity that reaches out to everybody. And Oskar is going to do a great job of that. But he's got one of the courses. We've actually got 4 research threads. Each one of those has one of these courses. And so we've executed our first new iteration. This was back in January and February. We had the strategic competition in Russia, which really leaned on a lot of the experience that we had already before. But we updated that, and we put strategy in the front end and the back end. And in fact, we've done the exact same thing where we've bracketed every one of our courses where we have strategy on the front and the back. But then that brings me to the course that we've just done in April and May. That was European-led defense. the name itself implies we're being responsive to what we need to do and help Europe and the transatlantic relationship build for a European-led defense. Our third course, which actually starts on Monday, Hybrid Threats and Cybersecurity. Once again, you can see where we've recalled some of this in the past. We had the Cybersecurity Studies program. We've brought that in. And as we're looking at next year, we're probably going to broaden that even further into strength and deterrence through resilience. And then we're going to incorporate some other changes to that next year. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. And then, of course, our fourth is emerging security issues. And that's going to be coming up September through November. I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the rest of the program, and then we'll throw it over to Oskar. So we, as I mentioned, we've bracketed strategy. And within this, we've thread both technology, but not just talking about technology, but the implications of it. How do you craft strategy when you now have these new drones and hypersonics and Gen AI speeding up the OODA loop that our decision makers need to think through when they craft strategy? We, as I've mentioned to you and everyone else, we can't do anything in the Marshall Center authentically unless we bring in lessons from what's happening in Ukraine right now. So that will be throughout all of our curricula. And of course, Defense Industrial Base. And I'll use that to kind of segue into, we have our resident courses, and we also strive to have 4 in-region workshops as well, which are even more responsive to the times. So during European-led defense, we conducted an in-region workshop in Munich, which has become something of an epicenter for the entire European Defense Industrial Base. And we bussed all of the students, all the participants, the faculty, and we met with European Defense Industrial Base at the Bundeswehr Institute for Technology. It was a fantastic event, and one that just kind of demonstrates what we're doing to stay relevant and also kind of update our pedagogy to make sure that we are having people move on with a skills-based training that they can use for their government. So finally, what I need to discuss too is our alumni will remember our previous funding model. That's also had to change as we move forward into NATO 3.0. So now we are accepting self-funded or self-sponsored students or participants. You could say it's something of a tuition. But it's not tuition in the traditional sense. The Marshall Center remains an appropriated funds activity. What does that mean? We don't make money. We're only supposed to charge by the financial management regulations of the United States, that which we need to bring back to cover our costs. What does that actually mean then? For someone who wants to attend 1 week of our courses, the cost for military or government civilian is $691. If it's for an individual from a private organization, the cost is $4,300 and change after that. So that kind of frames the overall where we're at, why we've changed, how we've changed. And I would just say for anybody out there who may be thinking about that tuition piece, if you're not really sure, just register, go to the link at marshallcenter.org and work with our registrar, and they'll sort that all out for you.
Yeah, that sounds like a great change for the Marshall Center, but also what I'm hearing is there is a continuity, there is institutional memory and a lot of expertise and experience of the in-house professors and also invited speakers, but also this responsiveness and agility and adaptivity to quick changes. So would you say that now the courses are not that much about some academic and theoretic approaches as the framework, but actually very practical, skills-based, something result-oriented that participants would be able to take back to their home countries and institutions and actually deliver something that their bosses would expect from them after 7 weeks or 1-2 weeks here at the Marshall Center?
I wouldn't say we've abandoned the strategic thinking and instilling critical thinking, but you really nailed it with the skills-based training. In fact, a colleague of mine for the Strategic Competition in Russia course, he contacted me. I'd known him for decades, and he had wanted to come to this course. And he told me that the only reason why his boss allowed him to come was because he was going to take a problem that their organization, he works for a NATO organization here in Germany, their organization was really struggling with. And that he was going to bring that problem, as we asked all of our participants to do, brought that in, and then through the tools that we provided across the entire 4 weeks, he came back with a product that they're actually implementing back at his unit right now.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And with this, let me turn, Oskar, to you, because this is the core that we're all now preparing for as professors, as the whole broad team of the Marshall Center. So could you tell us what should we expect from this course? Because I've heard many buzzwords that you're going to touch upon during the course, starting from quantum computing, strategy, space, emerging security threats, technologies, autonomous systems, everything. Being a Ukrainian myself, that I keep reading about from the battlefield in Ukraine. And as Tim mentioned, we're going to talk about this as well. So could you tell us a bit about the modules, the specific module that you're going to have during the course, and also what are your expectations as the course director from the main outputs and deliverables of this course?
Thank you, Yevgenia. Before I come to the details, I would like to mention that I developed a leitmotif for the course. Strategic transformation for European defense, capability building through space, technology, and industry. And every module I'm now talking about is linked to that leitmotif. And we start with module 1, strategy development, especially focusing on the ends, ways, and means analysis. And this specific learning process does not end with the end of the module. There are going to be elements of strategy development in every following up module. Module 2, space, the participants will learn about militarization of space, but also space as an economic domain. Participants will learn about the perspective of the United States, the major space power, also the perspective of Germany, who recently decided on significant investments on new space capabilities, and the perspective of Europe, especially European Union, their programs and how they want to reach more autonomy. And for this module, we will have an additional professor from the European Space Agency, ESA, to be available the whole week to support and guide the participants when it comes especially to technology and what is possible and what is not possible. And then we have module number 3, and you mentioned it already. Participants will learn about the technologies, the new technologies, emerging technologies, hypersonic, artificial intelligence, quantum, and autonomous systems. And to explain these technologies, we'll work closely together with the TUM, the Technical University of Munich, and additionally, participants will learn about the potential impact of these new technologies into the different fields of national and collective security. Module number 4 will focus about capability development and implementation and the crucial role of defense industry. It's about, and participants will learn about the industrial requirements to start or scale up production, and to understand this perspective, this industrial perspective better. I plan also a field study trip to Munich. You may have heard about the European Space Hub in the Munich region. So we are going to visit also enterprises and to get this and to understand, try to understand this perspective. Additionally, participants will learn how the European Union is going to intend to support defense industry, but also the perspective of the United States, how they support European allies within the NATO. And then we have a 2 weeks elective phase. This is a 2 weeks period where participants can choose topics of their interest, one topic with a more global dimension, one topic with a more regional dimension. They are working very closely together with professors and experts, doing in-depth analysis and develop new strategic approaches. And finally, the course culminates in a sort of capstone strategy accelerator where participants transform the insights into actionable recommendations and present them to a high-level security panel. And this module also includes particularly the implementation portion of the strategy. So these are the modules we offer, all linked to the leitmotif. And I'm sure participants go back and are very much empowered to prepare better their decision makers.
Well, you persuaded me. I actually now start thinking about applying for this course because it looks really, really nice. So I'm not sure whether the Marshall Center professors can apply, but can you tell us about the ideal candidate for this course? Who can actually apply? Do you have any expectations, any criteria for the potential candidates?
Yeah, the ideal candidate would be a young up to mid-level security professional with a professional experience of 5 to 10 years. It could be a participant from government, from military, also from industry and research. And it all is about, different perspectives, doing commonly analysis and try to develop solutions together.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a follow-up question, but let me remind to our audience that you have an option of chat questions. So please, if you feel like you have any specific questions about the application process, about the deadlines, or anything else you might be wondering, please feel free to leave your questions in the chat, and our team will help us bring it to the screen so we'll be able to address those. And while we're waiting for the questions, Tim, I saw you nodding and smiling every single time when Oskar mentioned this intersection of industry and academia and government professionals, security professionals, both on the official side and on the commercial industry side. And I think the Marshall Center is uniquely positioned with the proximity to Munich, to the defense ecosystem, space hubs, innovation hubs in Bavaria, to actually bring together people who are the thinkers, the doers, the payers. So is this also part of the new philosophy of the Marshall Center to build this new community of interest on defense industrial base?
It absolutely is, Yevgeniya. And we were going down that path. We've already structured so much defense industrial base conversation within what we're doing, within our resident courses, our in-region workshops. And I discussed some of that a little earlier. Oskar just hit it. But we're not the only ones who see the Marshall Center ideally placed to facilitate some answers to these difficult policy questions. We had in February General Breuer, the German Chief of Defense, and then the Supreme Allied Commander, General Grinkovich, came to the Marshall Center back in February, and they directed us, Marshall Center, I need you to host a program. And they gave us very specific directions that they wanted to bring in defense industry from both the United States as well as Germany, to have a discussion, a raw discussion, if you will, about what are the problems. They, as the senior military operator, said, this is where we want to go. We feel we've communicated our direction. But we don't see industry doing what we needed to do. The industry leaders said, well, we're not getting that exact same signal. And we discussed all of these different issues over the course of what we called the gap dialogue. So I brought a prop, if you will. So on the 11th and 12th of June, we had the GAP dialogue hosted and discussed, as I mentioned. But also the two 4-stars said, listen, this is not to be a one-time event where we get together and discuss. A lot of those are happening already in the ecosystem. What they wanted is for the Marshall Center to become something to operationalize some answers. And so we're going to get at those already with what we're doing in the resident courses. But we've also created the Transatlantic Industrial Readiness Program. The key is really this industrial readiness. Oskar already mentioned some of the issues: scalability, resilience, innovation cycles, how do you do all of that for nations that right now are at peace, trying to learn lessons that are coming from Ukraine? And as you get further away from the battlefield, it gets even more difficult on how do you incorporate that. So I'll just use my prop here as well. And I did the exact same thing when we were in the GAP dialogue. I showed this to the generals and I showed this to all the industry leaders. And I said, this is the cycle on which we're going to go. And one of the things I find very exciting is we're incorporating wargaming. We're going to start with some tabletop exercises in our next course, Hybrid Threats and Cybersecurity. And then Oskar is going to expand on that a bit, and he's going to have a tabletop exercise. But we've already got some people that are part of our organic staff and faculty that have connections to the Bundeswehr Institute. Last night, I had a conversation with a wargamer from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. So we're really moving in an exciting fashion. But what I would say is we need industry to be a part of this. If we don't have industry there, then we'll continue to move forward on paradigms and assumptions where we need industry to be in the room with us to help us work through these problems together. I really appreciate you asking that question, Yevgeniya.
Now, I'm actually going to add this question also to Oskar, because you mentioned several weeks, several modules of the 7-week course, the flagship course of the Marshall Center, which is the ESI. So I heard strategy, but I also heard a lot about implementation, execution, accelerator at the very end. So it seems to me that we are moving a bit from this talking the talk piece to the walking the walk piece, and trying to bring together people who can talk to each other, discuss all the problems that they have on the industry side, on the government side, the European, the American side, etc. But could you tell us a bit about the these practical, let's say, modules of the ESI course, and also how would the organizations of our participants benefit from this course? Because honestly, if I'm a boss and I'm sending someone for 7 weeks to spend nice time in Garmisch, close to the ski season, I want to make sure that they come back not only with good memories, which we'll definitely make sure they have here, but also with some practical, actionable outcomes. So how would the organizations benefit, and how would participants benefit professionally from this course?
Practical exercises, tabletop exercises, red teaming is a crucial part in every module. It's not only in the end when participants present their strategy and their implementation plan to a high-level security panel. It's an inherent part in any module we offer. The difference is, especially in the elective phase, but also in the other modules, participants are working very closely together with very experienced professors and experts on these practical exercises. This is different, you know. These are very small group, very precise problems, strategic problems we try to analyze and then to resolve. So this is a different learning experience, and I expect, and this is also my experience, I expect the participants very much empowered at the end of the course.
Great. So just to highlight this again, our participants would be able to choose both different modules. So they can come for module 1 and 7, for example, or modules 2, 3,
Yes.
4, and also to choose different topics and different thematic clusters within the elective phase.
Yes, this is correct.
Okay, great. So now we have a question from the chat, and I will read it to you. Is it possible to attend only a specific week or module of the course, or is participation in the full program preferred? But I think you already answered this right now. So yes, feel free to apply for any of the weeks preferred, and then I think our registrar team will help you with the next steps, how you should enroll in our program. So maybe one question before we get to our final stage and wrap up the discussion. If I cannot visit this course in the fall of 2026, will I have an opportunity as a potential participant to apply for different courses or this course in 2027? Do we already know what expects us in 2027?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. And I'd mentioned the marshallcenter.org, and if someone goes to that, they'll see that we've already published the 2027 catalog. And in that, it's just a 2-page flyer that you can take a look at. It will describe the courses. It will have in there the dates. And it's really a refinement of what we've done in this current program plan. As I mentioned, there's a bit of a change. What this year is hybrid threats and cybersecurity. Next year, it's strength and deterrence through resilience. The idea is the same, but we want to incorporate a little bit more, again, like what's happening in the civilian arena, civilian resilience. You know, we need to think through what NATO's looking at right now. On the eastern flank, they're calling it the Eastern Flank Deterrence Initiative. And they see this autonomous zone where it's mainly occupied by a lot of sensors that are queuing things using Gen AI to happen kinetically. Well, there's humans that are in this Eastern Flank Deterrence Initiative in this autonomous zone. And so I think that's something that we're going to examine next year. But I would just encourage everyone to go to marshallcenter.org and take a look at that catalog. And I'll offer, there's also the opportunity. We're broadening our online learning opportunities. We've explored having some hybrid opportunities where we had a small number of people watching the lectures that were happening here in the Marshall Center in plenary. We're going to do that again during hybrid threats and cybersecurity. I think we have 29 people signed up for that. And then we're going to continue to broaden that portfolio as well. Maybe look at some autonomous, asynchronous or synchronous online learning that is happening separate from our resident courses. So stay tuned. There's a few other changes afoot as well.
Yeah, stay tuned and come in person if you can't make it online, and the other way around. And we have actually a very practical question. Oskar, maybe you would like to address that one about the full cost for government officials, including tuition, participation fees, accommodation, meals. So overall, what should be the rough estimate of the course participation?
Well, recall earlier I'd mentioned that for government officials, the tuition right now is $691 per week. And then if you add on top of that the lodging and the travel, I'm not sure exactly where you're coming from, but I want to say you can find lodging right here at the Edelweiss Lodge and Resort. I think they're charging $147 per night. And then the meals become something of a personal choice. We have our interns who are really going on the cheap plan. But that really becomes you're in a tourist town. You can find food of all cuisines and of all price ranges. So that's kind of up to the user. I will add there are some special cases where people have applied, and we found some sponsorships or some other special rules. So if it's something you're interested in, I would say don't self-select out because you're not sure. I would say please apply, work with our registrar, and then they'll let you know what category that you fall into.
Great. So we have 3 minutes, and maybe if I'm 99% convinced that I want to apply, but there is 1% which I still have doubts about, what would be your recommendation or last words to make me 100% sure I should apply for this course?
You know, we talk about the future in this course, and also, I mean, it's autonomous system. We expect this as the future of war, and we need to be prepared for that in a whole government approach, in a whole society approach. And therefore, we look into it in detail, try to understand the emerging technologies and what the impact might be. So we are talking about future and the future of our people. And therefore, I would very much recommend to apply.
Any last thoughts, Tim?
I have so many last thoughts, but not enough time. In my past, I was the Dean of Academics and the Commandant at NATO School Oberammergau. It's just up the hill. It's a fantastic institution. I think they have about 120 courses in the catalog right now. I'm a retired military myself. I've been involved in defense industry and requirements for 10, 12 years. What Oskar is doing in this emerging security issues course, bringing in the technology, I am convinced it's going to be one of the most unique courses and thrilling courses. You know, that what's happening right now, it's seismic shifts, not just from technology, but from our security environment. And as you've mentioned, where the Marshall Center sits, it is kind of incredible to me the way things have just formed around us, as we already sit with this foundational relationship with Germany. Germany, which so many allies, they want to take the lead in where NATO 3.0 is going to go. With Munich, because of the Bavarian State Ministry having become this over the past 3 years, a firebrand of defense innovation. I should mention, we had just industry, not defense industry, but regular industry that has come to us as well and said, how do we become a part of this? We see that we need to be a part of this. So I hope I can convey the enthusiasm out to anyone who's interested. This is the time to come to the Marshall Center and be a part of what Oskar's put together. So yeah, again, just please apply. Let us sort it out, how the tuition piece works.
Not too much to add to this, maybe just one last sentence, which is very classy for the Marshall Center. We say that the Marshall Center experience starts here, but it never ends. And it's also about lifetime connections, alumni networks, and your professional network that you can broaden and widen, learning from each other, exchanging your ideas, enjoying policy conversations, discussions, and also nice environment in Garmisch. Although it's raining today, it would be okay in fall. So we're looking forward to welcoming you to the Marshall Center, and please apply for the course or send us your questions if you still have some remaining after this short brief. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a good rest of the day.